spiritually, they that be with us are more than they that be with them. So if we feel surrounded by the enemy, we feel like things in the world are, wrapping up, situations are becoming dire. There's a lot of talk today about fear of the mandates that will come. They've produced a vaccine, if we believe we are told what we are told, with great speed, and governments are going to mandate that and implement that, and people are getting worried, and it seems like the net is tightening, like we're saying, and people are fearful. Just remember the words of Elisha: they that be with us are more than they that be with them. So many people, I get this question asked repeatedly, almost daily, not quite daily, but almost daily. People ask about the vaccine. When the vaccine is out, should we take the vaccine or should we not take the vaccine? Now, I'm not here today to necessarily give you a yes or no answer. We're going to talk about that briefly, but I want us to remember the bigger picture, because like the servant, so many times, all we see is what's here and now. There is something happening behind the scenes. We need to see the invisible, and seeing the invisible happens with the eye of faith. And fear, the servant feared to lose his life, that they were captured, they're going to be arrested, they're going to be killed. Fear today of, say, the vaccine or the mandates or the virus itself. Some people are afraid of the virus, that are getting the virus and are going to die, and whatever. However people's reactions are. As believers, let us not be like the servant who seemed to be so inexperienced in spiritual things. All he could judge by was what he saw with his senses, and it terrified him. Let us remember that we have incredible, precious promises, and we are to believe them by faith, and that is how we are to operate now in light of what's happening. There is no doubt that there is a surrounding of armies in the last days against God's people, spiritually, not just physically. What we're seeing physically, we have to remember, they that be with us spiritually are more than they that be with them, also spiritually, because the battle is not just a physical battle, it's not just on the level that is seen. This is the promise I want to remind you of what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, because people ask about the vaccine and fear of the vaccine. Let me tell you something. Here's what Jesus says, Matthew 10, verse 28 to 31. And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing? And one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear ye not therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. That's the promise of Jesus. Because every time this question is asked about, should I take the vaccine? Should I not? Should I go here? Should I go there? What should I do? It's an expression of concern, fear, worry. Maybe fear that the vaccine will do something harmful to you. Look, what's the worst thing that it can do? It's going to kill you, right? Or maybe some people might say, well, maybe that's not worse. Maybe it will alter your DNA. It will alter your mind. It will turn you into, I don't know, what kind of a monster, what kind of a thing. Who knows? There's all kinds of fear. Jesus says it right here. This is the promise. This is the all-encompassing promise. Don't fear them which are only able to kill the body. In other words, even should you die, don't worry. God is greater. God is in control. And God is in charge. His eye is on you. You are of more value than many sparrows. Even the hairs of your head are numbered. So therefore, don't fear. Fear is the opposite of faith. The servant was fearful. Elisha prayed that the servant's eyes would be opened so that he could see the invisible with his physical eyes. Are we able to see the invisible with our spiritual eyes of faith? That is the question. Fear is really faithlessness. That's why when Jesus says here, fear ye not therefore, he says, don't be faithless. Remember the bigger picture. Remember the invisible. Be like the servant with his eyes opened, not like the servant with his eyes closed. Or in other words, be like Elisha. Elisha was a man of faith. Here is how fear and faith relate to each other, according to Jesus. In Matthew chapter 8, we read about that. And this is what Jesus said to his disciples in that incident when there was a storm on the sea. And his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. And he saith unto them, why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. So notice here, the disciples exhibited fearfulness. They were fearful. And fearfulness is little faith. And why were they fearful? Because they judged the situation based on all they could see. All they could see was a storm and tempest, and they felt that they were going to die. They were perishing. Does that sound familiar Today we see a storm approaching around us, whether it be regulations, governments, mandates, what's happening. The net is tightening. We can't travel. If you travel, you're required to do this and do that, and things that seem to be detrimental to life and health and wellness. And we are fearful, and we're almost going to perish, and we're panicking. What am I going to do? Lord, shall I row harder? What shall we pull the sail down or not? What are we going to do? The storm is going to kill us. That's the attitude of the disciples. Many times we exhibit a similar attitude when we look at all these things. And Jesus wakes up and says, listen, why are you fearful? Why are you panicking? I am in charge. I am in control. And when he describes their fearfulness, he describes it as being of little faith. Now, what am I saying here? Am I saying, if you're fearful of what's happening, what's coming, you are faithless? Yes, that's exactly right. If you're fearful and so worried that you will lose your life, then you're exhibiting faithlessness. Be faithful. God is in charge. In other words, your life, you've given it to Christ. He's entrusted with it. He's in charge of it. He will raise it at the last day. The worst thing that man can do to you is kill you, and then he will raise it, and that's it. Why should you worry? You are of more value than many sparrows. And fear here, that's what was the storm for these disciples. I have to apply the equivalent for us today is whatever storm we face in life. We're going to face a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation. And God does not want his people to approach that time fearful. God does not want us to be in doubt, in panic. Oh, Lord, what am I going to do? What's going to happen to me? This is the attitude that God wants his people to have. What's it based on? It's based on seeing the invisible. How do we see the invisible? Based on what God's word reveals to us. God is in control. God is in charge. Let man do whatever man wants to do, aided and emboldened by the forces of darkness, Satan and his host, no problem. Guess what? They that be with us are more than they that be with them. Do you really believe that? Because if you really believe that, that's going to impact your fear. If you believe that and you have faith in that, guess what? Faith and fear don't mix. They're the antithesis to each other. If you really believe that, you will not have fear. Look at Elisha at the story. We're going to go back to the story in a minute. Look at Elisha in the story. Was Elisha fearful? Was he panicking? Was he, oh no? He actually exhibited faith without necessarily his eyes being open, just trusted. He knew God is with him. God is in control. The whole army of Assyria, the whole army of the planet might as well come and surround him. No problem. They that be with us are more than they that be with them. And what did Elisha do? He exercised his faith in a way to encourage and open the eyes of the fearful. This will be our work among our brothers and sisters. There will be some among us who will be fearful, who will be like the servant. And those among us who need to be like Elisha, faithful, and encourage and take the hand of the fearful and remind them and open their eyes, essentially pray that they might open their eyes and have faith. It might not necessarily happen as, with the servant and have their eyes physically open and see actual angels. That might not necessarily happen. The story is recorded to teach us something about faith today, to open the eyes of the fearful so that they can behold by faith the invisible. And in the invisible, they will see that God is in charge. God is in control. Jesus says that birds, they fall and God accounts for the birds. How much more you? God knows the hairs of your head. God knows what's being prepared for you. God knows what's going to happen. God knows what you're able to go through or not go through. He's in charge. And this is what Jesus told his disciples. So, brothers and sisters, take courage. Are you seeing the invisible? They that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elisha's words are so significant. I want us to focus on that a little bit and spend a little bit of time looking at Elisha's words. They that be with us are more than they that be with them. Because today, I put it to you that so many people are like the servant of Elisha. They're looking and seeing what is happening in the world, and they feel alarm and fear because it looks like there is an army, there is an opposition. There is all kinds of circumstances and situations developing to oppress, to tighten the hold. Some people are saying the net is tightening, and there is a certain sense of panic and fear, it seems, that is actually setting in. And like the servant of Elisha, people are getting fearful. It's like seeing the enemy close in. Fear is what the servant of Elisha manifested. Faith and seeing the invisible is what Elisha had, and that's what he prayed for the servant to have, and then his eyes were open. And when his eyes were open, he actually saw the armies of heaven, and the armies of heaven far outnumbered the armies of Assyria. Now, the interesting thing is this. Elisha knew this. He saw the armies of heaven, not because he had necessarily his eyes open. It wasn't like he could see that all the time, but by faith, he knew and understood what was really happening. He could see the invisible, and he prayed for his servant to join in and to see that as well. Great, great lesson for us. Now, this point here about they that be with us are more than they that be with them. I want you to note something about the wording here. Let me put this up because this is worth noting. The wording, as he says here, they that be with us in verse 16. They that be with us are more than they that be with them. Isn't that interesting? He didn't say they that be with us are more than them. He says they are more than they that be with them. So there was an invisible force with Elisha and his servant that was more than another invisible force that was with the army of Assyria. I want you to get this point. He wasn't just talking about the army of Assyria. Elisha could see the invisible. In other words, he could see that what was happening was really an attempt by Satan to capture and kill him, to destroy him. And Satan was using the army of Assyria. And Elisha was saying, in this battle, oh my servant, in other words, in this battle, it's a spiritual battle. It's not just the armies that you see. They that be with us, the heavenly host that is with us, is more than they that be with them. They that be with the Assyrian army, in other words, the host of darkness in the spiritual battle. So seeing is not just saying, okay, here, seeing this side with us, or the enemy wasn't just the Assyrian army. The enemy was also those that be with them. If you can see the invisible, and by faith you follow in God's direction, guess what? God will navigate you through whatever scenario will develop. The problem in the last days, let me put it to you, is going to be more than just whether I take the vaccine or not. Seeing the invisible.